Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 7 of Social and Economic Justice 1. We are in the home stretch of the course, and I'm sure everybody is grateful for that. I know that we have packed a lot of information into the past 6 weeks, and I really appreciate everybody's effort with doing the readings and keeping up with the discussion posts and the written assignments. I think this has been a really great class, and I've learned a lot from reading all of your posts. So this week we're going to talk about globalization, and you're going to be reading an article and watching some videos and also listening to a couple of podcasts. This idea of globalization, it's sort of become a buzzword, really. I mean, I think we hear it pretty much every day if you watch the news or in the media or on the internet. But we're going to really look at what this means and what it means to be sort of connected globally and internationally. Up until this point in the course, we've primarily talked about social and economic inequality from the perspective of U.S. history, and within the context of what's happened in this country over the past 300 years or so. But this week, you're really being asked to think more globally, to take the concepts that we've been learning about and to apply them on a much broader scale, and really to think about what the implications for social work are within this idea of globalization. So what is globalization? Lyons, who published an article in the British Journal of Social Work regarding sort of the role of social work within globalization, and that article is cited at the end of this presentation if anyone is interested in it. Lyons talks about a couple of key features of globalization. She talks about sort of the expansion of corporations in industrial countries to developing countries. So you think about, you might hear of a big U.S. company that opens a facility or a factory in Mexico, or a credit card company that ships out their call centers to India or Malaysia. So it's this idea that over the last 30 years or so, that the ability for corporations to do that has become much easier and much more common. And as a result of that, there's been this spread and rising of power of these transnational corporations worldwide. So these are corporations that are not just based in one country, but that have offices and operations in many countries throughout the world. And that goes for not just U.S. companies. I mean, you'll see in one of the documentaries you're going to watch this week, it's companies and corporations from India, not just the United States, other European countries. And some of the reasons that this has been possible, Lyons notes, relates to she calls the liberalization of international finance systems. So the international laws that govern these systems have sort of enabled corporations to be able to expand to the extent that they have. And then the other piece to this is the role of transportation and technology, and how much more accessible in some ways that those things have become over the last several years. We're able to travel fairly quickly. With technology, we can communicate at a pace that was unprecedented before. So that's a really, in a nutshell, overview of globalization. You're going to be watching a fairly lengthy documentary about globalization, where you're going to see sort of what some of these bullet points look like in reality. Just to give you some thoughts or perspectives on globalization, Carlos Salinas, who is a Mexican politician, says that globalization is a fact of economic life. And that's this idea that our economies, the United States economy, is very much intertwined with this larger global economy. And it's a fact of life for us here in the United States, and it's a fact of life for other countries as well, developing countries, for industrial countries, that we are sort of all interconnected. And what does that mean? What are the implications of that? Kofi Annan said, "It has been said that arguing against globalization is like arguing against the laws of gravity." So to me, that says something about how this has become normalized, that this is our global reality right now, and it's not something that necessarily we can easily fight against. And should we be fighting against it? These are all questions for you to think about as you're watching and reading this week. And Jimmy Carter said, globalization as defined by rich people like us is a very nice thing. You were talking about the internet. You were talking about cell phones. You were talking about computers. This doesn't affect 2/3 of the people of the world. So again, we've talked a lot about inequality within the context of the United States, but as you're reading and watching about globalization, think about how does inequality exist on a global scale, and how does globalization contribute to that? One of the if you remember, one of the documentaries we watched early on in the semester talked about the role of corporations in contributing to the economic inequalities that exist in the United States. As you're watching this week, think about how globalization perhaps contributes to the inequalities that exist in developing countries as well. So again, a lot of the concepts that we've talked about this semester, I think, very much apply to this concept of globalization. As you're watching and reading, think about how globalization is defined. Who is defining it? What are the populations that are impacted? And really be thinking about what is our role as social workers in all of this. I think it's very easy for us to get caught up in our day-to-day realities of our jobs that we're in, and the populations that we're dealing with, and the economic and social inequalities that we're encountering in our daily lives here in the United States. Sorry about that. But sometimes I think we need to take a step back and also think about what does this bigger picture look like. If I'm working with older adults here in the United States, and looking at some of the inequalities that exist within that population, what is the connection between that and the issue on a global scale? So just beginning to think about sort of what the role of social work is in all of this. And this is a reference to the Lyons article that I mentioned. I'm going to pause here for one moment, and then I'm going to talk to you a bit about the discussion post assignment that's due this week.